The island of Gran Canaria is currently grappling with one of its most severe meteorological crises in decades as Storm Therese continues to batter the Canary Archipelago. As of March 26, 2026, local authorities have maintained a red weather alert, citing unprecedented rainfall volumes that have transformed scenic ravines into deadly torrents and paralyzed the island's infrastructure. The disaster began earlier this week when Storm Therese, the 19th named storm of an unusually active 2025 to 2026 Atlantic season, stalled over the islands. While the Portuguese Weather Service initially named the system due to risks in Madeira and the Azores, the Canary Islands have ultimately borne the brunt of its fury. By March 24th, the situation escalated rapidly. Heavy downpours dumped over 100 millimeters, 4 inches, of rain within a 12-hour window in several southern and eastern districts. According to the Spanish National Meteorological Agency, AEMET, the volume of water was so immense that over 14 million cubic meters were discharged into the island's reservoirs in a single day. The geographical heart of the crisis lies in the island's barrancos, ravines. Usually dry, these volcanic channels became conduits for massive flash floods. Dramatic footage captured dozens of vehicles being swept away by muddy waters toward the sea. Coastal towns have reported submerged businesses and homes. In Maspalomas, the iconic beach areas were rendered impassable as floodwaters moved through the dunes and tourist plazas. The capital city saw numerous valleys and urban tunnels go underwater, leading to a total standstill of the metropolitan transport network. Critical infrastructure has suffered significantly. Several major roads have collapsed or been blocked by landslides triggered by the saturated soil. The island's government, Cabildo de Gran Canaria, was forced to close schools and suspend all outdoor activities, including hiking trails, as falling rocks and flash floods posed a threat to life. Emergency services have been overwhelmed, recording approximately 300 major incidents on Gran Canaria alone within a 24-hour period. In one harrowing incident, British tourists were filmed pleading for help from the roof of a submerged minibus before being airlifted by emergency helicopters. For the first time in recent years, a rare red alert emergency warning was broadcast directly to all mobile phones on the island, urging residents to stay indoors and avoid all travel. Compounding the rain, wind gusts of up to 100 kilometers per hour and waves reaching 6 meters have battered the ports of Arguineguín and Agaete, forcing the cancellation of several inter-island ferry services. Meanwhile, the island of Lanzarote, famous for its lunar landscapes and arid volcanic terrain, is currently facing a catastrophic weather event. On March 26, 2026, the local government, Cabildo de Lanzarote, declared a Level 2 emergency as Storm Therese moved northward from Gran Canaria, bringing torrential rains that the island's porous but non-absorbent soil could not contain. What was once a desert paradise has been transformed into a network of muddy rivers. As of this morning, the capital city of Arrecife and the historic town of Teguise are largely inaccessible, with authorities describing the rainfall as geologically transformative. Lanzarote typically receives less than 150 millimeters of rain annually. However, in the last 48 hours, weather stations in Haria and Peñas del Chache recorded a staggering 180 millimeters, 7 inches, more than a year's worth of precipitation in 2 days. The crisis was triggered by a stationary convective cell, fueled by abnormally warm sea temperatures in the Atlantic. Unlike the mountainous western islands, Lanzarote's lower topography allowed the storm clouds to sit directly over the island's center, dumping water with surgical precision onto the vulnerable volcanic plains. The unique geology of Lanzarote has exacerbated the flooding. The island is covered in malpais, badlands, and volcanic ash, lapilli. While these materials are porous, the sheer volume of water caused a phenomenon known as surface saturation, where the water began to move horizontally at high speeds. The capital, built on a low-lying coastal basin, saw its drainage systems fail within hours. Areas like El Charco de San Ginés overflowed, with seawater and rainwater merging to flood ground floor apartments and businesses. In the historic former capital, water rushed down the slopes of the Guanape volcano, turning cobblestone streets into dangerous rapids. Heritage buildings, some dating back to the 15th century, have suffered structural damage. These tourism strongholds reported submerged hotels and the complete destruction of beach promenades as the runoff reached the sea, carrying tons of volcanic debris. The LZ1 and LZ2 highways, the main arteries connecting the north and south, have been severed by several mini-landslides of volcanic rock. Lightning strikes and flooded substations have left approximately 30,000 residents without electricity in the districts of Tinajo and Yaiza. Cesar Manrique Lanzarote Airport, ACE, has seen dozens of diversions. While the runway remains clear, the access tunnels are flooded, preventing staff and passengers from reaching the terminal. In the surfing village of Famara, emergency teams used jet skis to rescue residents trapped in their homes after the main access road was swallowed by the rising tide and mountain runoff. Over 500 tourists were evacuated from rural villas in Ligueria, where the famous vineyard pits, V-shaped holes in the ash, acted as temporary wells, trapping vehicles in deep mud. Units from the Military Emergency Unit, UME, have been dispatched via sea from neighboring Fuerteventura to assist in clearing debris and providing mobile telecommunications. There is significant concern regarding the island's cultural sites. The Llameos del Agua and the Cueva de los Verdes, volcanic tunnels transformed into art spaces by the late artist Cesar Manrique, have been closed. Reports suggest that water has seeped into the lower levels of the Llameos, threatening the delicate ecosystem of the blind albino crabs found nowhere else on Earth. The unique vineyards of Ligueria have been decimated. The force of the water has washed away the protective stone walls, zocos, and the vital volcanic ash layer required for grape cultivation. With the peak spring season approaching, the island faces a race against time to repair its iconic white and green aesthetic, which has been stained by brown silt and mud. Meanwhile, the island of eternal spring is currently unrecognizable. Fuerteventura, the oldest and most arid island of the Canary Archipelago, is grappling with a catastrophic meteorological event that has defied all historical precedents. As of March 26, 2026, the island remains under a red weather alert as Storm Therese continues to dump torrential rain across the desert plains and volcanic massifs. The president of the Cabildo de Fuerteventura has officially declared a state of island emergency, describing the situation as an unprecedented climatic assault on an island that typically receives less than 150 millimeters of rain per year. The crisis began on March 22nd, when the tail end of Storm Therese, a powerful Atlantic system that had already devastated Gran Canaria and Lanzarote, stalled over the Jandia Peninsula. Due to the island's flat topography compared to its western neighbors, meteorologists initially predicted moderate rainfall. However, a phenomenon known as a convective train formed, where storm cells followed the same path repeatedly. In just 6 hours, the municipality of Pajara recorded 145 millimeters of rain, nearly its entire annual average. The sun-scorched, compacted earth of Fuerteventura, which lacks the dense vegetation found on other islands, was unable to absorb the water. Within minutes, dry riverbeds, barrancos, that had been dormant for decades, transformed into violent, mud-choked torrents. The tourism heartland has been severed. The main FV2 highway was breached in 3 locations by runoff from the Barranco de Peñascal. Tourists in the high-end resorts of Costa Calma were trapped as the lower levels of several hotels were inundated with silt and volcanic debris. The historic mountain village of Betancuria, the island's first capital, became an island within an island. Massive landslides of volcanic rock blocked the winding mountain passes, cutting off all land access to the village. Urban flooding has paralyzed the capital. The drainage systems, built for rare and light showers, were overwhelmed. Basements, underground parking lots, and the iconic harbor district saw water levels rise to over 1 meter. In the north, the famous sand dunes of Coralejo were carved into new shapes by the rushing water. The fishing village of El Cotillo reported significant coastal damage as the runoff met a 6-meter Atlantic swell, creating a dangerous backwash that flooded seafront restaurants. Fuerteventura Airport, FUE, remains technically open for emergency operations, but over 60 commercial flights have been canceled or diverted. The lack of road access to the airport has left thousands of passengers stranded in terminal buildings. Ironically, the island of water, as its name is sometimes misinterpreted, is facing a water crisis. Flooding has damaged the power lines serving the CAAF, Consorcio de Abastecimiento de Aguas que Fuerteventura, desalination plants. Without power, the island's primary source of drinking water is offline. Several telecommunication towers in the Morro Jable area were toppled by 110 kilometers per hour wind gusts, leaving the southern tip of the island in a digital blackout. In a harrowing operation, emergency teams used swift water rescue techniques to save a family of 5 whose caravan was being swept toward the sea in the Barranco de Vallebrón. Fuerteventura is home to more goats than people. Farmers in the Arguineguín region have been working through the night to move herds to higher ground. Despite their efforts, officials fear the loss of thousands of animals, a devastating blow to the island's famous Majorero cheese industry. Local sports pavilions in La Oliva and Gran Tarajal have been converted into temporary shelters for over 1,200 people who have been evacuated from flood-prone zones. With the Easter season approaching, the image of sunny Fuerteventura has been replaced by images of mud-covered beaches. The hospitality sector is calling for a Marshall Plan for the Canary Islands to repair the damage before the summer season. The unique flora of the Arguineguín Desert, including several endangered species of cacti and succulents, has been physically uprooted or suffocated by mud. Meanwhile, much of the global media focus has been on the flooded coastal resorts of Maspalomas and the urban chaos of Las Palmas. A far more desperate human and geological crisis is unfolding in the high-altitude sanctuary of La Culata. Perched within the rugged caldera of Tejeda, this historic hamlet has been effectively erased from the island's transport network as Storm Therese continues its relentless assault on Gran Canaria. As of March 26, 2026, La Culata remains in a state of total isolation. The only road access, the winding GC60, has vanished under a series of catastrophic landslides, leaving nearly 300 residents and dozens of trapped hikers facing the fury of the elements, without power, running water, or outside assistance. The geography of La Culata, surrounded by the towering monoliths of Roque Nublo and Roque Bentayga, has turned from a scenic asset into a deadly trap. During the peak of the storm on March 24th, weather stations in the area recorded a vertical deluge of 240 millimeters of rain in a single 12-hour cycle. Because La Culata sits at an elevation of approximately 1,200 meters, the rainfall was accompanied by near-freezing temperatures and 110 kilometers per hour winds. The volcanic soil, already saturated by a week of precursor storms, finally gave way. Local residents described the sound of the mountain moaning before massive sections of the slopes above the village collapsed, sending boulders the size of small cars into the residential streets. The isolation of La Culata is not merely physical, but digital. At 4:22 a.m. on Wednesday, the primary telecommunications relay on the Pico de las Nieves was struck by a powerful lightning discharge, followed by the physical collapse of the fiber optic lines along the GC60 highway. The electrical grid, which serves the remote mountain districts, suffered multiple terminal failures as pylons were swept away by mudslides. The local natural springs and the municipal water tank have been compromised by silt and volcanic ash, forcing residents to rely on stored bottled water and ancient stone cisterns, aljibes. A 50-meter section of the road connecting Tejeda to La Culata has simply ceased to exist, swallowed by the Barranco de la Mina below.